Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Linux for Your Average Gamer. In this episode I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of switching to Linux. Hopefully this will help you make the decision of whether Linux is for you or not. And if you found this video useful, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content from this channel and more of this series, be sure to subscribe. But let's get right into this. I'm going to start off with the pros. The first pro of Linux is your data is now your own. Now, I know this is a really controversial issue with Windows and all, but the truth of the matter is Microsoft is taking your data, whether you're aware of it or not. Nowadays, it's more common knowledge, but still. Now, you might not have a problem with a company taking your data. You might think that, well, you just fit in with the crowd and it doesn't really matter that much. But what you don't realize is that on top of taking your data and using it for marketing purposes, research purposes, and much more than that, Microsoft is also selling your data to what's called data warehouses. And these data warehouses, in turn, will sell your data to the highest bidder, whether that be a marketing firm or Chuck, who lives in his basement, who's been tracking you since high school. Not to scare anyone, of course. While Apple is still better about this in some ways, they're still just as bad. macOS is stealing your data just as much as Windows is. But in Linux, no one is stealing your data. Now, granted, some applications still can take data, but the operating system itself is not taking your data. I'll talk about application security and privacy in a later video. Pro number 2, you have more control of your PC. Now, with Windows, you don't really have a lot of control over what is happening on the very low level of your computer. Now, this might not be important to a lot of people, but it can apply to other scenarios on a higher level as well. For example, if you want to customize how a notification might look, or how an application built into the computer might look, you can do that on Linux, but you can't do it on Windows. For example, if you want to truly switch over from using Microsoft Edge to another browser as your default browser, you can do this on Linux, but you can't do it on Windows. As a matter of fact, you can't uninstall Microsoft Edge on Windows. You can uninstall pretty much anything on Linux. Pro number 3, you will become more technologically literate. Now, this might not be important for some people, but believe me, in this world and age that we live in, technological literacy is very important. Plus, it can also be handy in pretty much a ton of situations. Now, becoming more technologically literate using Linux might not be the case for everyone, but it should be the case for everyone, honestly. It might even be more difficult to not become technologically literate or more technologically literate while using Linux. Pro number 4, customization galore. One of Linux's major selling points, which is ironic because Linux is free, is customization options. You can customize literally everything in Linux. If you don't like how the taskbar looks, you can move it anywhere you want. If you don't like how the desktop environment looks, you can completely reorganize it to make it look like a completely different operating system. If you still don't like how it looks, simply trade it out for another desktop environment. If you don't like how an application looks, you can customize it, whether it be in a configuration menu or in the literal code of the application. Still don't like how it looks? Make your own. If you want more examples of the infinite customization options available on Linux, check out the subreddit I have linked in the description. And don't worry, it's not NSFW, despite the misleading title. Now we move on to the cons. Con number 1, you will have to use the terminal at least once. Honestly, this isn't really a con, it just depends on how you view it. For some reason, a lot of people are actually scared of using the terminal, and I don't really see why. All the terminal is an application where you type in words, or commands is more commonly referenced, and that in turn will do things. If you've seen any form of modern movie, even some older movies, you've most likely seen someone entering commands into a terminal, and if you do that, you'll look cool, I guess, which, now that I say that sounds really weird, but whatever. But overall, experience with the terminal is extremely handy, believe me. Con number 2, you will have at least one problem. Now, this might sound scary, but the truth of the matter is it's not scary. It's kind of like whenever you go through driver's ed, and they say, according to the laws of probability, you are guaranteed to at least have one wreck in your lifetime. It's kind of like that, and you can have a problem with Windows or macOS just as much as you can have a problem with Linux. Sometimes you might have a problem on Windows or macOS that you wouldn't have on Linux. But the truth of the matter is you will at some point face a problem. But don't worry, usually they're pretty easy to resolve with just a little Googling, and if you still can't resolve it, that's why I'm here. leave any problems, I guess, that you have in your comments. I'm still working on a form of contact. Con number 3, some tinkering is required. Now, again, don't let this scare you, but yes, sometimes some tinkering is required, whether it be to get a program to work or to work better than it works currently, or to get a game to work or something like that. But for most cases, it's really not as hard as you think. For most cases, at least for me, to get a game to work, all I have to do is switch the version of Proton it's using, which I'll talk about Proton in a later video. Plus, I'll be making more videos on how to get specific games working, or just a general video on how to maximize game compatibility on Linux and different stuff like that. And I will also be doing requests in the future, but just don't worry about it. Tinkering is not as hard as you think, and like all other things, you get used to it. But that's all I actually have in the way of cons. Now, believe me, this is not a full list of pros and cons. There are many more pros, as there's probably many more cons. Probably not as many cons, though. If you have any pros or cons that I forgot to list here, leave them in the comments section. My personal final verdict of whether Linux is worth it or not, judging the pros against the cons, is yes. I've had the best experience out of using Linux, far better than I've ever had using Windows. The amount of customization alone that you get on Linux ultimately makes it worth it. And you might think that you're leaving a ton of compatibility behind, but the truth of the matter is, tools like Wine and Proton have gotten so good over the years that you're not leaving nearly as many programs or games behind as you think. And if you're still scared about compatibility issues, there's this amazing thing that you can do called dual booting. Now, I will make a video about dual booting later on, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video because it's a full topic in and of itself. With dual booting, you'll be able to use Linux, maybe get a slow slide into using Linux, while still having all the available Windows programs that you know and love at your fingertips. I myself dual boot Windows and Linux solely because I play Call of Duty and occasionally Destiny 2. Destiny 2 is rumored to get Linux support eventually, but at the moment things aren't looking good. Call of Duty, chances are, will never get Linux support, but you never know, Activision might surprise us. But yeah, my overall recommendation is Linux is worth it, and it's a far better experience than Windows. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped you figure out on whether you should use Linux or not. And again, if you have any more pros or cons that I might have missed, be sure to put them in the comments section. I'll look through them. I might make another pros and cons video later on, but that's it for now. Bye!